not what your country can do for you. Ask what you can do for your country.
It's 8:52 here in New York. I'm Bryant Gumbel. We understand that there has been a plane crash on the southern tip of Manhattan.
What I heard first, an explosion, and I just figured that it was a plane passing by. Then all of a sudden, stuff just started falling, like bricks and paper and everything.
Oh, say, can you see by the dawn's early light what so proudly we hailed at the twilight's last gleaming, whose broad stripes and bright stars through the perilous fight o'er the ramparts we'd watched were so gallantly streaming, and the rocket's red glare, the bombs bursting in air, gave proof through the night that our flag was still there. Oh, say, does that star-spangled banner yet wave o'er the land of the free and the home of the brave?
Like most everyone, I remember exactly where I was when I heard about the attacks on 9/11. At the time, I was a lieutenant stationed in California, and like most days, when I woke up, prior to heading into work, I turned on the TV to catch the news, and that's when I saw the images of the aircraft impacting the World Trade Center. And like everyone else, I was stunned by what I was seeing, and can remember a surreal and somber feeling across the nation that lasted for quite a while. But similar to the attacks on Pearl Harbor back on December 7th, 1941, the tragic events on 9/11 definitely pulled the nation together, and many in the military at the time, including myself, were quickly sent to the Middle East. Within about a month of the attacks, I transferred from my shore duty assignment and joined an F-18 squadron that deployed on board the Stennis aircraft carrier heading over to 5th Fleet, and I subsequently spent a lot of time over the next several years underway on back-to-back deployments. And although many years have passed since the 9/11 attacks, it's definitely a day I will never forget. In addition to the significance that day had on our nation, I had two relatives who worked in the World Trade Center, and unfortunately they were both killed, which made the events of that day much more personal for me. And I also have another cousin who truly served with courage as a member of the New York City Fire Department, working tirelessly for many weeks following the collapse of the towers. And even though the tragic attack on 9/11 was nearly 2 decades ago, it's important that the events of that day in our nation's history not be forgotten. So on the anniversary of 9/11, I encourage everyone to take some time to remember and honor those whose lives were forever changed, the friends and family members of those who lost loved ones, and the heroic efforts of the first responders. For me, the memory of that day is a somber and very powerful reminder for the reason we take the oath, wear the uniform, and serve and defend our nation as members of the United States military.
On a clear, sunny late summer day in September 2001, Al-Qaeda terrorists aboard 3 hijacked passenger planes carried out coordinated suicide attacks against the World Trade Center in New York City and the Pentagon in Washington, D.C., killing everyone on board the planes and nearly 3,000 people on the ground. A 4th plane crashed into Pennsylvania Field, killing all on board after passengers and crew attempted to wrest control from the hijackers. This is the chronological order of events of 9/11 as they unfolded. All times are Eastern Daylight Time. American Airlines Flight 11, a Boeing 767 with 92 people aboard, takes off from Boston's Logan International Airport en route to Los Angeles. United Airlines Flight 175, a Boeing 767 with 65 people aboard, takes off from Boston. It is also headed to Los Angeles. American Airlines Flight 77 takes off from Dulles International Airport outside of Washington, D.C. The Boeing 757 is headed to Los Angeles with 64 people aboard.
United Airlines Flight 93, a Boeing 757 with 44 people aboard, takes off from Newark International Airport en route to San Francisco. It had been scheduled to depart at 0800 around the time of the other hijacked flights.
On 9/11, I just checked into my squadron. It was my first duty station. I was in VF 81 out in NES Oceana. I was coming back from making a parts run with my LPO at the time. It was showing me around the base.
On 9/11, I was actually in high school, which was in Lower Manhattan, roughly 8 to 9 blocks away from World Trade Center. I was a sophomore in high school, starting my sophomore year.
I'm really proud of, and I mean this sincerely, I'm proud of the JFK teammates for wanting to remember. I think for most of us that are here that are senior, at that time we were junior. I was in Oak Harbor, Washington. Leslie and I were together, engaged, and the attacks occurred. I was on the West Coast, so the attacks began very early in the morning.
I was actually in Guam. I was stationed back then, Commandant Marianas. So I was actually Chief Select at the time. So for me, it was September 12th. And I remember PT being canceled.
I was scared. My grandpa, he was born on September 11th. So his story was the main one I heard before I was in grade school and saw the footage and everything.
I was at Naval Air Station Pensacola going through A school. I was 19 years old, only been in the Navy about 6 months.
I just remember it being a very somber day. I believe my school let me go home early. I didn't really know what was going on. When I got home, I played outside. I remember it just being noon, 1 o'clock. Normally school would go till 2 or 3, so they let us go home a little bit early, and I watched the news later on that day with my parents.
Mohammed Atta and the other hijackers aboard American Airlines Flight 11 crashed the plane into the floors 93 to 99 of the North Tower of the World Trade Center, killing everyone on board and hundreds inside the building. Within seconds, NYPD and FDNY forces dispatched units to the World Trade Center, while Port Authority Police Department officers on site begin immediate evacuation of the North Tower. White House Chief of Staff Andrew Card alerts President George W. Bush that a plane has hit the World Trade Center. The president is visiting an elementary school in Sarasota, Florida at the time. Hijackers crashed United Airlines Flight 175 into floors 75 to 85 of the World Trade Center South Tower, killing everyone on board and hundreds inside the building.
I remember hearing the radio, and it was faintly, when you wake up in the morning, you're like, an attack. And I got up, and I walked down the living room, and I turned on the TV. The first plane is already slammed into the towers. It was early in the morning, like I said, because I'm on West Coast time, so kind of groggy, and you could see the panic on the TV. It's consumed all the national networks. And then I remember the second plane going into the building, and my mom called, and she's like, Dave, you need to turn on the TV, something's going on. And I go, okay, and I'm already watching, Mom. And I looked at Leslie, and I'm like, we're going to war.
First, we didn't know what was going on. We thought maybe it was a radio prank. When we got back to the squadron, and the news started to trickle out, and the chiefs came down and started talking to everybody and letting us know what was going on. And it was actually a real occurrence of what had happened.
The whole building shook. Our screens went off for a split second and went back on. And literally, everyone thought it was a joke because no one would ever think a plane will hit World Trade Center. So I remember it like it was yesterday. By the time we evacuated, I could see the second plane already flying into the World Trade Center, which was insane. It looked like a movie. The entire thing looked like a movie. Seeing all these events, definitely not being sheltered. As a chief select, I was open to everything that I probably wouldn't have been normally as a first-class petty officer. So to put the pieces together, to actually understand what the reports were saying, and then our posture, definitely a learning curve for me, but understood what our role was.
By the time we got into class, the next plane had hit, and it was, I wouldn't call it chaos, but something out of a movie almost. Everybody was running around. It was a little like pandemonium in the classrooms there.
I remember watching the news with my dad and sitting up on his bed, and just they were running the images and the video footage that was shot from that day, and it was really sad. I cried with him.
Speaking from Florida, President Bush calls the events in New York City an apparent terrorist attack on our country.
Today we've had a national tragedy. Two airplanes have crashed into the World Trade Center in an apparent terrorist attack on our country.
Hijackers aboard Flight 77 crashed the plane into the western facade of the Pentagon in Washington, D.C., killing 59 aboard the plane and 125 military and civilian personnel inside the building.
For the first time in history, the FAA grounds all flights over or bound for the continental United States. Some 3,300 commercial flights and 1,200 private planes are guided to airports in Canada and the United States over the next 2.5 hours. The South Tower of the World Trade Center collapses.
My grandma, she worked at the Pentagon, and she was actually out on her lunch break with my grandpa, so that was the only reason how she avoided the attack.
So the very next day, that afternoon, they came down and asked for volunteers to go to the George Washington and fly out and help support, anything that's going on up near New York. So I volunteered, was able to go out there and do that.
Why would somebody do this? We talk about it nowadays like, it's our generation's version of Pearl Harbor.
I was afraid. I didn't really know. My emotions were very, very mixed at that time. And I just felt helpless.
After passengers and crew members aboard the hijacked Flight 93 contact friends and families and learn about the attacks in New York and Washington, they mount and attempt to retake the plane. In response, hijackers deliberately crashed the plane into a field in Somerset County, Pennsylvania, killing all 40 passengers and crew aboard. The World Trade Center's North Tower collapses 102 minutes after being struck by Flight 11.
The 47-story 7 World Trade Center collapses after burning for hours. The building had been evacuated in the morning, and there are no casualties, though the collapse forces rescue workers to flee for their lives. President Bush addresses the nation, calling the attacks evil, despicable acts of terror, and declaring that America, its fans, and allies would stand together to win the war against terrorism.
Thousands of lives were suddenly ended by evil, despicable acts of terror.
I was stationed in Mechanicsburg, Pennsylvania. I was able to go there during last chief season, and it was nice because I had never taken the time to really read and listen to the tapes and understand, and listen to the volunteers talk about it, and really reflect on what it must have been like. And that, these people on the plane, they didn't take the oath of enlistment or the oath of commissioning. They stood up right then and there and decided to be selfless and protect the country, protect the people on the plane as best they could.
I think as we go throughout life, one of the things like 9/11 that really sticks with you is always the saying, never forget. Never forget. And that, we apply that to everything we do, especially as armed service members. For me, I never once thought I would be in Iraq. Never thought I'd be, boots on the ground, doing things that, especially as a shipboard sailor. So for me, really how it has affected me is just, it's given me that mentality of never forgetting the fallen. And, one of the sayings goes, we honor the fallen by how we live our own lives. So if you think back to 9/11 and you think of all the first responders, all the people who went to work that day and had no idea it was their last day on earth, I think any day that we show up and we don't give 100% effort, we do them a disservice and we dishonor their memory. So that's how it's really impacted my life, just being aware and always showing up for others.
9/11 definitely changed my life for the better. I learned to appreciate every day as if it's your last, literally. You never know what's going to happen.
I feel like it's one of those things that are in history books, so I feel like I'm learning about it from like a third-person perspective, with fresh eyes.
The events that took place on September 11th touched all Americans, to include our U.S. military, from its tactics to its strategy to its equipment to its people. Much changed after the attacks on the World Trade Center, the Pentagon, and the events that took place in Somerset County, Pennsylvania. But not everything. Shortly after taking office, then Chief of Naval Operations, Admiral Jonathan Greenert, reinforced the Navy's legacy of warfighting success by setting forth these tenets. Warfighting first, operate forward, and be ready. The USS New York, the USS Arlington, and USS Somerset embody the fighting spirit of every American that fought and lost their lives that horrific day. With 7.5 tons of steel from the World Trade Center towers in the New York's bow, an I-beam from the Pentagon in Arlington, and 22 tons of steel from the cranes excavator used in recovery operations in Somerset, these ships are able to carry on the courage and sacrifice displayed that fateful day. From the ashes of the tragic events that took place that day, we as a nation were able to rebuild and come back stronger. These 3 ships are a constant reminder of the selfless sacrifice given that day and allow us to never forget.
The biggest lesson you learn from 9/11 is, like I said before, tomorrow is not guaranteed. 1 hour from now is not guaranteed. So if you take something as big as 9/11 and what happened on our own soil, if that's not enough to get you to get up every single day and, give 100%, do your little part of the world, whether you're, sweeping the sidewalk or you're out here in combat, whatever it is, 100% do your best.
Simplistically said, what I would tell Lieutenant J.G. Scarosi is, do your job. Do your job the best of your ability at every moment and every day, because your job is vitally important to the team's job.
I am the flag of the United States of America. My name is Old Glory. I fly atop the world's tallest buildings. I stand watch in America's halls of justice. I stand guard majestically over great institutions of learning. I stand guard with the greatest military power in the world. Look up and see me. I stand for peace, honor, truth, and justice. I stand for freedom. I am confident. I am arrogant. I am proud. When I am flown with my fellow banners, my head is a little higher, my colors a little truer. I bow to no one. I am recognized all over the world. I am worshipped, I am loved, and I am feared. I have fought in every battle of every war for more than 200 years. Gettysburg, Shiloh, Appomattox, San Juan Hill, the trenches of France, the Argonne Forest, Anzio, Rome, the beaches of Normandy, Guam, Okinawa, Japan, Korea, Vietnam, in the Persian Gulf, and in a score of places long forgotten by all but those who were there with me. I was there. I led my soldiers, sailors, airmen, and Marines. I followed them and watched over them. They loved me. I was on a small hill in Iwo Jima. I was dirty, battle-worn, and tired. But my Marines and sailors cheered me, and I was proud. I have been soiled, burned, torn, and trampled on the streets of countries that I have helped set free. It does not hurt, for I have been soiled, burned, torn, and trampled on the streets of my own country. And when it is by those I have served in battle with, it hurts. But I shall overcome, for I am strong. I have slipped the bonds of earth, and from my vantage point on the moon, I stand watch over the uncharted new frontiers of space. I have been silent witness to all of America's finest hours, but my finest hour comes when I am torn in strips to be used as bandages for my wounded comrades on the field of battle. When I fly at half-mast to honor my soldiers, my airmen, my sailors, my Marines, and when I lie in the trembling arms of a grieving mother at the graveside of her fallen son or daughter. I am proud. My name is Old Glory. Long may I wave, dear God, long may I wave.